BleemSync 1.1 has finally been released, and I'm going to walk you guys through how to get this set up on your PlayStation Classic. This is Steve from Restalgia, and let's get started. Hey guys, so before we get started, I just want to make sure that you guys understand this video is specifically for upgrading from a previous version of BleemSync to the latest version. If you are going to be doing a fresh install, please go to the description down below and click on the fresh install link. It is a different process. So again, if you are doing a fresh install, go down to the description, click on that video and watch that one. This one is only going to be for people who are upgrading from BleemSync 1.0 or above. All right, so we can go ahead and get started. All right guys, so the long anticipated BleemSync 1.1 has arrived, and the exciting news is what that means is we now have OTG support, which is absolutely awesome. So no more throwing in a USB hub in your player 2 slot and having cables all over the place just to play multiplayer. We can now pop our USB drive into an OTG adapter through the back of the console, and both ports will be free and clear on the front of the console for us to plug our controllers in. There's a few other cool features that they've included. One of them is going to be a game transfer tool, which is going to be pre-built right into the software, and I will show you guys exactly how to use it. It's super easy. We're going to have to download an image database, transfer it onto our USB drive, and then we're pretty much good to go. We're going to be able to drag and drop all of our games right onto our USB drive and get everything loaded up nice and quick. I know there was a lot of complaints about the BleemSync UI portal that we had to log into when we plugged our console into our computer and loading one game at a time. This is going to make things substantially easier, a lot quicker, and you can drag and drop all your games in one shot. So I'm definitely glad that's the route they've decided to go. Now I do want to say that I have access to a private beta, and that's what I'm going to be basing my tutorial on. So I'm not going to be able to show you guys where to download the file from in the video, but I will leave a link directly to the page for you guys to download in the description down below. Just for timing's sake, I'm going to be able to have my video launched at the same time as release, so there's no way for me to be able to actually link to the page because the page isn't up and running yet. That being said, again, the links are going to be in description, so hop on down there, go ahead and download your BleemSync 1.1 release. So moving on, I've actually already got my beta build right over here. You can see it's right here on the desktop. What we're going to do, as always, once it's downloaded, it'll be zipped. We have to unzip it. We're going to right click, we're going to extract it to its own folder. Doesn't take very long to do that. We've now got our new folder, and I'm just going to pop it up here. We're going to go ahead and open it up and take a look to see what's inside. So it's actually really basic. What we've got here is we've got a BleemSync folder and we've got a payloads folder. That's all that we've got. So there's a few different ways to do an install. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys what I think the easiest way to do the install is. What's going to be required, if you've already got an existing AutoBleem build, that's fine. You're going to need a second USB drive, just a small one, a 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, 2.0 USB drive that we know is functioning with BleemSync or is functioning and compatible with the PlayStation Classic. And the reason we want that is because we're going to install the kernel using our extra USB drive, and once we've installed the kernel, then we're going to transfer any of the important files that we need from that first USB drive over to our existing build. And I think that's probably going to be the easiest way for most people to do it. The important thing is that you are using a compatible USB drive. The easiest way to find one is a low volume, so if you're looking at 2 gig, 4 gig, 8 gig, or 2.0. That's going to be your main one. Now, for me, I already have a 32 gig that I know is compatible. I've used it about, I don't know, a dozen times doing a bunch of different builds. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave a link to it in the description down below. It's one of those really thin, low profile 32 gig SanDisk USB drives, and I'll throw a picture of it right here up on the screen so you guys can see exactly what I'm talking about. I know they work. I will leave links in the description down below if you want to pick one up for this specifically, but it's not necessary. If you guys have an older USB drive, definitely grab that and use that. There's no sense in spending money on one, especially since it's only going to be used for a 2-minute part of the installation. So anyways, now that we've got that, I've got my USB drive already popped into my computer. I'm going to go ahead and open it up. And it's right over here. You can see it's SanDisk and drive H. We need to right click on that and we need to format it. So for the purposes right now, we need to make sure that it is formatted to FAT32. I believe it's also supported for ext4, but for what we're going to be doing, it's just going to be running on FAT32. We need to make sure that the volume label is labeled as Sony, all caps. Then we're going to go ahead and hit start. It's going to ask if we're sure if we want to do this. We're going to hit yes. Okay, perfect. So it's now formatted. We're going to go ahead and hit OK. We can close that. We're going to open up our drive again. And it's right over here. So one thing I want to mention with this installation, we're going to be going back and forth from the PlayStation Classic to the computer just a couple of times because there's going to be some file transfers that we're going to want to do. Essentially what this build is going to do is it's going to take a backup of the existing kernel information and the existing software on your PlayStation Classic. It's going to load that copy onto your USB drive, and then what we want to do is we want to take that, we're going to make a copy of it, and we're going to keep it somewhere safe. And the reason we want to keep it somewhere safe is that in the event that you ever run into a problem where your PlayStation Classic gets corrupt or something happens to it, those recovery files are going to be incredibly important for you to be able to fix your PlayStation Classic. The way that this is going to be built is that each individual PlayStation Classic gives its own unique codes in these recovery files, and without those unique codes, you're not going to be able to reformat or reflash your PlayStation console. So you can't just grab somebody else's files and try to flash yours. The files that are created are unique for your PlayStation Classic. So what we're going to do is we're going to go on, and I'm going to make sure that I show you guys exactly how to handle things, but just be very aware that you're going to want to do things exactly like I do in the video, and you're going to want to make sure that you don't skip ahead or skip any steps. We want to do everything very methodically to make sure that nothing happens to our PlayStation Classic. Now, I know I might be scaring some of you guys. Don't worry, everything's going to be fairly straightforward, but just make sure that you guys are watching and doing everything step by step as it's done in the video. Awesome, so here we are. We've got these two files that we've just downloaded. We're just going to go ahead and copy those into our USB drive. Alright guys, so now that the files have transferred over, what we're going to need to do is we're going to remove our USB drive from our computer. We're going to unplug all power and everything to our PlayStation Classic. We're going to pop our USB drive into the second controller port, and then we're going to plug in the power to our PlayStation Classic, plug in the HDMI, and we're going to power on our console. And we're going to get some prompts on screen. It's going to then create that backup of the existing firmware on the PlayStation Classic, and it's going to load it and transfer it onto the USB drive, so that way we have our backup. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a double view almost. So I'm going to show you guys what the PlayStation Classic is going to be doing, as well as what's going to be happening on screen of your TV. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over right now so you guys can see exactly what that looks like. Okay, so we have our PlayStation Classic unplugged here, and this is my USB that we've been working with. We need to plug it into the controller port 2 just like with all of our other previous builds. Next, we need to reconnect the power cord. Now we just have to wait for the amber light to turn on. Once that happens, we can go ahead and press the power button and turn on our PlayStation Classic. I'm going to have the PlayStation Classic screen running in the bottom corner so you guys can see what's happening on screen as well. What we're going to see is that the PlayStation Classic will be backing up the existing kernel, recovery, and data partitions. This can take about 5 minutes or so just be patient. What we're going to see is that the PlayStation Classic is currently backing up the existing kernel, recovery, and any data partitions that are on it. This can take up to 5 minutes, so just make sure that you're a little bit patient and let it do its thing. We're going to notice that the LED on the PlayStation Classic is going to be alternating between red and green, and that's totally fine. It's going to continue to do that while it's working. There's also going to be information displayed on the screen letting you know exactly what steps are happening. I'm going to fast forward through this process, but remember this will take about 3 to 5 minutes for you guys to have run on your PlayStation Classic. Once everything's finished backing up and the new payload's been installed, we're going to have a screen letting you know that the hack's completely done and the console is going to shut down in about 5 or so seconds. Once this happens and the console has fully shut down, just wait until you get that amber light on your PlayStation Classic again, and then you know it's safe to remove your USB drive. Then we're gonna go and pop it into our computer. Alright, so now we're back on our computer, and what we've gone ahead and done is we've removed our USB drive again from our PlayStation Classic. So we went through that whole process. The PlayStation Classic did what we mentioned previously. It backed up the existing kernel and the partitions, and it installed the new kernel. It installed a bunch of new files onto your PlayStation Classic. What we need to do now is take our USB drive that we just used. We're going to plug it into our computer, which I'll do right now, and it'll pop up automatically. So you can see there's a new folder in here called logs. If you open it up, there's going to be just the bootloader information in there. But when we go into BleemSync, if we double click on this BleemSync folder, there's going to be something called backup. And if you open up backup, there should be 3 files in here. So these are the 3 files that were written, and these are your backup files from your PlayStation Classic firmware. So what we need to do is we're going to make a copy of this backup folder, and we're going to leave it somewhere on our computer, and we're not going to touch it unless there's an emergency. Now, I do want to make sure that you guys understand you want to keep these files on your USB drive. That is very important. If you don't have them on here and you plug this USB drive into the PlayStation Classic again, it will create it'll create a new backup, but it'll be a new backup of the new installed firmware that we just installed. So we don't want to do that, because then we're not going to be able to restore back to stock. This backup is important that it stays on the drive, as well as we make a copy of it and we place it somewhere else on our computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy it directly to the desktop. And there it is. So now I have both on my USB drive. I still have my backup folder, which is right here. And I also have a backup folder over here on my desktop, which is going to contain the exact same files. So again, we're just going to leave this here, and we're not going to touch it again. This is our emergency backup files. We're going to leave it where it is. The next thing that we're going to need to do is install a custom kernel onto the PlayStation Classic. So this is going to be something that we have to download as well. So again, the link that I'm using, you guys won't have access to. I'm going to provide all the proper download links in the description below, but I just need to hop on here and download this custom kernel. And I'm just going to save it right to my desktop. It's done. We're going to go ahead and minimize that. Where it says lboot.epb. This is the file that we're going to want to use. So we need to transfer it on our USB drive. So I'll go right back to the root so you guys can see. So this is our USB drive. We're going to double click on BleemSync, and we're going to double click on the update folder. We're going to double click in here, and we're going to drag this right into that folder. So now that it's in there, the next step that we've got to do is, again, we're going to remove our USB drive from our computer, and we're going to pop it into our PlayStation Classic. Now it's going to install the custom kernel. So we're going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to unplug my USB drive. I'm going to pop it into the second controller spot on my PlayStation Classic, and we're going to power on the console. So we're going to go ahead and switch over to that right now so I can show you again both what's on screen and what the PlayStation Classic is going to look like it's doing. Alright, so again, we're going to go ahead and plug our USB into the second controller port, and then we're going to go ahead and plug the power cord back in. Once the amber light comes on, we're safe to press the power button. Again, on the screen, we're going to be given some prompts as to what's happening. We're going to wait for the process to finish. The console is going to power off, and then when the amber light turns back on, we'll be able to remove our USB drive again. Alright guys, so we are back again on our computer, and I know, as I mentioned before, there's going to be a little bit of going back and forth for this install, but if you've got your PlayStation Classic right by your computer, it's really not that big of a deal. So what we need to do now is we need to take that USB drive that was just in our PlayStation Classic, and we need to plug it into our computer. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. Perfect. So you can see here we've got the lboot.ebp right on the root of the drive. We've also got our logs, BleemSync, and we've got a payloads folder here. Next, what we want to do is take our previous build for our BleemSync, and I'm going to go ahead and pop this into another USB drive on my computer, and it should load up right over here. Perfect. So now I'm just going to set the new version and the old version side by side. So the new version is on the left, the old version is on the right, and we can see that I have my RetroArch games here. We've got a games folder, we've got logs, we've got all of these things here. Hey guys, I just want to stop the tutorial really quickly and let you guys know that you should create a backup of your old BleemSync version. Whether you just copy all the files onto a separate folder in your desktop or on another USB drive or something, you're going to want to have a backup just in case anything happens. I don't anticipate you're going to run into any problems, but if you do, at least that way you don't lose everything that you've previously built, all of your game saves or any of your configurations or anything like that. So definitely a good idea to make a backup. Other than that, we're going to go ahead and jump right back into the tutorial. So now what we're going to want to do is transfer the files from our new USB drive over to our old USB drive. And what we're going to need to do first and foremost before we even start transferring anything is we need to take the payload folder from our old USB drive and we need to get rid of it. We need to delete it. So I'm going to go ahead and remove it, and it's no longer going to exist. The next step that we're going to do is we're going to highlight everything here and we're going to copy it over to our old USB drive. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fast forward so we don't have to wait on this. Now it's going to ask us if we want to replace all the files in the destination, and the answer to that is yes. Alright guys, so as you can see now all of these files that have just been transferred over are still highlighted, which is indicating to me that they are new and they are updated, so that's great. So that's all that we have to do on the computer for now. As I mentioned, I'm going to show you guys how to transfer your games onto here if you are trying to add games in a separate video. I just think it'll be a little bit easier to do as a secondary part. But now that we've got all of this loaded up onto our USB drive, we're actually good to go ahead and pop our USB drive into our PlayStation Classic and boot it up. Now, because of the new firmware that we've installed and the new version of BleemSync, we now have OTG support. So I'm going to go ahead and use an OTG adapter, and there's going to be a couple different options that I would recommend using. So I'm going to show you guys both of those, and again what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what that looks like on the PlayStation Classic, and then I'm also going to go ahead and switch over to our PlayStation Classic screen. So give me just a minute here and we're going to go ahead and make that switch. As I just mentioned, we have a few different options for OTG adapters. I happen to have a couple of them here. The first is a really basic left elbow adapter. The second one that we have is a multi-end adapter. This is something that will probably come in handy later down the road once we have things like network support for RetroArch. You can have your USB connected into one of the ends and then a Wi-Fi dongle to another. That will allow you to plug multiple things into the console. For today, I'm just going to be connecting the left elbow style adapter. We just pop our USB drive into the side port. The OTG adapter then goes into the back of our console, and then we've just got to follow that up with a power cord. Now we just wait for our dear friend Amber, and we can turn our console back on. Alright guys, so here we are on our PlayStation Classic BleemSync boot menu, and as you guys can see, our OTG USB adapter is working perfectly fine, everything's good. The really nice thing about OTG support is that it's now 100% going to eliminate any power issues with USB drives. So a lot of you guys were reaching out and saying, hey, my USB drive isn't working, or hey, it loads, and then halfway through a game it crashes and I have to restart and things aren't working properly. That's because the USB ports on the front of the PlayStation Classic weren't able to supply enough power for the USB drive. That's no longer going to be the case. There's still maybe some incompatibility in the sense of USB drives, but now I'm going to say probably 80 or 90% of the drives that you guys try should work, and they shouldn't have any problems. And on top of that, if you guys wanted to do like a crazy master build with a ton of games, you guys could probably use external hard drives now. Either self-powered hard drives, or you could get some that don't require additional power because now you can plug directly into that OTG adapter. So that's really awesome. And of course, the other big thing is that now we have both our Player 1 port and Player 2 port available. So now we can use that, and our console doesn't look like it's Frankenstein anymore. It doesn't have 1,000 things hanging out the front of it. So everything is good on that realm. Now you guys are going to notice right away that there is a slight change here. On the top right hand corner we've got a settings button. I'm going to go ahead and press it. There isn't a whole lot in here that I'm going to mess around with, but there's a couple things if you guys want you can change. So if we're going to go ahead and hit L1 to enter the settings, you can see in here we've got a few options, and it's just essentially a true false menu. So right on the top you've got boot disable health as false. That's fine. But we've got our boot underscore menu underscore music. So that's if you don't like the music that's playing in the boot menu, you can go ahead and change that to false just by moving the left or right arrow keys. I like the music in the background. I'm going to leave it to true. So we have the boot underscore quick, which essentially means that it's going to skip the Sony animation at the very beginning. You've also got a boot splash, which is true. So that is when you turn on your PlayStation Classic, you've got that BleemSync screen that'll kind of be on screen for, I don't know, 3 to 5 seconds or so before it takes you into the boot menu. That's your splash screen. You can turn that on or off if you want. Other than that, the rest of this, I'm not really going to mess around with this. We're just going to go ahead and leave everything stock, but there is options in here. You can also change your themes. So here you've got Mod My Classic, and then you've also got your stock theme. I'm definitely going to leave the Mod My Classic theme in there, and I'm going to go ahead and hit cancel because I haven't actually made any changes, but if you did make a change, you're going to want to hit save. I am going to go ahead and boot into BleemSync. So we've still got our important health and safety warnings screen that comes up, and we've got all of our games here still. So this is great. This all looks, everything seems to look okay. Now I think I did see something new here, so I'm just going to shoot over to it. Right over here. So you can now access RetroArch directly through this menu. So that's a really nice feature. So before you were stuck, once you were in here, you'd have to back out and then go into RetroArch. Now you can just go ahead and enter it from here. So, but everything else looks really good. It looks exactly like the old build, but now we're running on OTG support, so that's really nice. And of course, now we've got the full access to our 2 USB ports, so there's no longer the need to have a USB hub laying around. We can go ahead and get rid of that, and we can have our console look much cleaner. So now that we're here, if you actually take a look, it's going to be in alphabetical order, so I didn't notice this at first, but right beside 007, you've got a boot menu option. So this is the very first option, and the RetroArch menu option is also in here. So right from within BleemSync, you have access to both. So you can get back into RetroArch, or you can go over to your boot menu, which is going to be right over here. So you have access to get it essentially anywhere from anywhere. So if you're in RetroArch, you can go back to your boot menu and then load into BleemSync. But if you're in BleemSync, you can access either the boot menu or RetroArch. So that just is a little bit easier for navigation. But that's pretty much it for this build, guys. It looks really good. I'm glad it's working. That OTG support is something I was really happy about. But that's what I've got for you. So I hope you guys enjoy this. I hope you guys get this thing installed with no problems. But if you do, as always, you guys can just reach me in the comment section down below. I'll do my best to help out that way. The other option as well is to join the Discord. If you haven't joined the Discord, join the Discord so that way you guys can get one-on-one support or direct support right from the development team if you guys run into problems. So be sure to give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, leave a comment down below if you need to, and I'll talk to you guys again real soon.